Come on, demons. Come on, demons. Come on, demons. Come on, come on, come on, come on, demons. I've got this feeling.
Good evening, Demon fans, and welcome back to the Demonland podcast. My name is Andy, and well, crisis averted for another week. We breathe a sigh of relief that we weren't the first team to lose to the winless bottom of the table Adelaide Crows, and now we have less than 4 days before our next match in this compressed fixture during the Festival of Football. I have no idea what day it is or what round it is or what constitutes a holding the ball decision anymore. Joining me tonight is long-time Demonlander George. Good evening, George. How are you going?
Good evening, Andy. And after a great performance by the team this week, you've got to pity the players who are now forced to spend 4 days in Adelaide. I think that's cruel and unusual punishment for the efforts they put in.
Well, wasn't it our Premier who said who would go to Adelaide, who would want to go to Adelaide anyway, only to be for us to be locked down and not even being able to go to Adelaide even if we wanted to. Also on the line tonight as a caller and not a co-host as we try to appease the Norm Smith curse is long-time caller to the show, Bin Man. Good evening, Bin Man.
Good evening, everyone out there in Demonland.
Well, boys, but we won't go into we'll go into more specifics shortly. But it's hard to gauge anything from this win. Prior to last week's insipid effort, we would have looked at this match as one we should win and win well, and we did. An 8-goal win against the winless bottom of the ladder team in a shortened match is a great outcome. However, we did this very ugly. First 3 quarters were not great to watch. We made a lot of mistakes. We failed to make the most of our opportunities. We were fumbly at times, and our disposal was also poor at times. We were absolutely murdered by some of the most inconsistent one-sided umpiring that I've witnessed in a long time, and I love to whinge about bad umpiring, so I know a thing or two about this. We were smashed at the clearances in the first half, and you know what? We beat a young side who will probably go through the season with only maybe 1, 2 at the most wins if they win any, and they'd made 9 changes from their last game, which is always going to unsettle the team. So I'm not sure we should be too excited by this. Big-Man, I'll start with you. Without going into too many specifics about individual players, what can we gauge from this match? What can we take away from it?
Well, it's an interesting one. Not a great deal, I don't think, in the sense that I know we're going to talk a bit later about Bartlett's comments, but in some ways it was a bit of a setup for a game that was we get the 4 points, but a 2-goal win, we would have been kicked around, and a 10-goal win we're downhill skis, though at least we kicked away in that last quarter. But I don't think there can be anything we can't forget how poor that team Adelaide is. 9 changes, as you mentioned, to a team that had won no games up to that point, so that's their 10th loss. I saw their percentage tonight is 55%. That it's been a long time since a team's gone through a season without a victory. I don't think they're going to get one, so I wouldn't be jumping up and down. We're only 12 points up at 3-quarter time, and there wouldn't have been a Demon fan out there that wouldn't have had at least a few concerns. Having said that, they only scored a goal in the second half, and that was after a Ben Crocker from Lever, who should have marked it instead of attempting to punch it and miss it. So they're a very weak footy side at the moment, so I don't think we can take too much. But it was good to see us kick away in that last quarter.
George, were you worried at any point in that last quarter or going into the last quarter that this would be one we might somehow get overrun by them in that last quarter?
The MFCSS was certainly bubbling to the top at 3-quarter time, being only 2 goals up against the bottom side. I recall when we managed to break Sydney's I think it was a 16 game, maybe even more game losing streak many years ago. So I thought maybe we might do the same again this time. The good news is that Mark Neeld can now rest easy because Matthew Nicks has now taken the title of the longest losing streak from a coach from Neeld, Brett Ratton and Damien Hardwick, who'd all scored 9, but Matthew Nicks now holds the record at 10. But seriously, in the game, I think the one positive is that we did what we needed to do in this game. As Binman just mentioned, if we fell over the line, that would be just as bad as losing. But in the end, we did what we needed to do in the game. We were expected to win comfortably, and that's what we did. I think the same holds for the game next week as well. So hopefully that form will continue into next week.
Before we get stuck into the discussion, we love hearing from Demon Landers. So if you'd love to join the program tonight to discuss anything that we're going to talk about, give us a call on 03 9016 3666, or you can Skype us at Demonland31. If you're listening to this show later on SoundCloud at demonland.com or via an Apple or Android podcasting app, be sure to subscribe to the podcast to receive updates when a new show drops. Leave us a favourable review, helps more people find us. We're also on Spotify and Stitcher, so you can get the show that way too. Go to demonland.com to find your preferred method of listening. If you're listening to the show live, come join us in the chat room where you can ask questions and post comments, and just head over to demonland.com/podcast. You can follow us on social media, Facebook at facebook.com/Demonland31, Twitter at Demonland, Instagram at Demonland31, or on YouTube, just search for Demonland Podcast and listen to some of the interviews we've conducted with current and past players and coaches. If you love talking about the D's 24/7 all year round, why not join up to Demonland.com and chat with other D's fans about this great club. Now, Clarry, one of the best games of footy this year, perhaps, in his career. 34 disposals, 22 contested, which is the most of anyone this season. 12 clearances, 6 tackles, 1 goal, 502 metres gained. One of the fundamental changes that I took away from his game was his ability to burst away from stoppages and get some distance away from his opposition. He usually just sort of wins that contested ball and flicks it out quite quickly, and oftentimes, but sometimes it's to a guy who's got someone on his, on his tail and gets tackled straight away. So I really like that aspect of his game, Big Man.
There were, the two big positives for me from that game were Steve May's game and his leadership and the way he sort of stood up for Lockhart, and even more so Clarry's game, because for me that was his best game of footy for Melbourne. And what I really loved was that he looked steeled right from the beginning, and it was what I wanted to see from him to that next level where he was a leader. He really looked focused. He looked like he wasn't, he was really had his mind on the job. And I loved the fact that he I think he's got a bit of a habit of not staging for free kicks, but that'd be a bit unfair, but sort of certainly overemphasising when he gets scragged, which he gets scragged a lot. He gets and doesn't get them, and he didn't do it in this match. He seemed much more focused, and he was rewarded, I think, with he finally got 2 or 3 of those free kicks where the jumper comes away from the body, where it seems like every other player in the league gets that free kick. That's what they're trained to look for, the umpires. And he got a couple, including that goal, and that was good to see him kick that goal. But I just thought he was tremendous and right through the game, but particularly in that last quarter where, as you say, not only was he's getting distance and metres forward, he was aggressive in his kicking, and I mean his kicking still wasn't brilliant at times, but at least if he's kicking at 50, 60 metres forward, it's not the same issue of handballing at someone next to him. So I was thrilled in his game, and I thought that was a fantastic thing to take away for the rest of the season.
You're absolutely right about the him usually playing for free kicks. He wasn't doing that, and he actually got a few this week. But he was being held at every single contest. Particularly, I noticed a lot more after half time. Obviously, once they targeted him as the player that needed to be tagged. But at every stoppage, he was being absolutely held and deserved every one of those free kicks that he got. George, your thoughts on Clarry's game?
Oh, absolutely everything that Binman's just covered off. the stats were fantastic. I agree that it's the best game he's played for this football club. When a coach tells you to take on the game, that's exactly what we saw from Clarry, and in a big, big way, he dramatically changed the way he plays and has played. We're suddenly seeing, I think he had 17 kicks and 17 handballs. In previous times it was all handball, and he's been progressively upping the ratio. But the best part was he suddenly started using his legs and breaking free, which we haven't seen at all. I wouldn't have said. And I think he's learned that he can gain as much meterage by doing that, as opposed to just, like you said, flicking out the handball to someone else to do the work. He is a very long kick. You might remember he won the end of the season long kicking competition over the Yarra 2 years ago. So getting the best value out of his leg as well as his hands was a great impetus for us. Admittedly, the Adelaide midfield is pretty ordinary, but this was the game to take up that opportunity, and he certainly did, and I'm very glad he did.
And I'll stick with you, George, just about Viney. I thought early on he was really important to our game. He's really starting to blossom as a footballer. We know what he can do, but he's starting to get some consistency into his game, isn't he?
Yeah, absolutely. And again, right from the very start, we all knew that this was a game that had to be won. And in that first quarter, you could just see that Jack Viney had determined that we were going to win this game if he had any say in it whatsoever. His efforts in that first quarter were just fantastic. And he dropped off a little bit in the second and subsequently, but came back strongly again towards the end. But you could just see the determination in there, the leadership, and the willingness just to go in at every opportunity. And he really set the mark for everybody else, showing them what they needed to do. So it was just fantastic. And to get a couple of goals out of it as well was a bit of a bonus for him, and a bit of a confidence builder as well. It was good to see. So, yeah, between him and Clarry, it was just a brilliant performance from the two mids.
Yeah, we've sort of been waiting for our midfield to sort of have sort of a bit of that impact on the goal, on the scoreboard, and with Viney with 2, Oliver 1, track didn't kick a goal this week. Not for want of trying, but it's good to see sort of our midfield sort of start impacting the scoreboard. Bin Man, anything to add on Viney?
He was terrific again. He's been great this season, hasn't he? And that goal, did he kick 2? I didn't realise he kicked 2.
Yeah, there was one little one in the goal square when Vandenberg knucked heads with a Adelaide player, and then the one that snap from the boundary, right. Which was a beautiful one. Yeah,
which was on his right foot, which was amazing. His right foot been lethal. I reckon his disposal efficiency on his right foot is about 95% this year, and that was a beauty. He sharked it off the pack beautifully, and I've been thinking that he'd be great up forward, even if he's racing up forward, because if you put him inside the 50-metre arc, he's a ferocious tackler. Just said, go crazy in there. He's actually a pretty good shot for a set shot as well. And obviously, the closer you are to goal, the less damaging any turnovers are. And I thought his leadership's been fantastic actually this whole season. And he is ferocious, isn't he? When he gets going, he must be some. When he gets tackled, his ability to shrug tackles is next to none, really. Maybe Petrarca in our team can be close, but he's an absolute bulldog.
I'll move on to Gussie now. It was a bit of that last quarter was a welcome back to Gus. He looked lost most of the game. I thought he had a pretty good last quarter, because up until then I would have had him clearly in the to be dropped category. Obviously, this is the Gus we want to see. He looked like the 2018 version of himself. Does his last quarter form against a winless team that had maybe given up. Does that sort of warrant a reprieve? Because I thought he was ordinary early on, so having seen what he can do, does that change your mind? I'll start with you, Big Man, in whether he continues on in this team.
Well, I thought actually hats off to Goodwin, because he was quite creative with how he used him, because as we know, he's a really solid wingman, and he decided to try him in a new position in that second half and put him in the middle.
Yeah.
And I wonder where it looks like we might have found another midfielder, because he was certainly a much better player once he was moved on the ball. But yeah, dropping the facetiousness, I'm not sure. I think he'll get picked again.
Yeah.
I would have had him out at half time, and I had to laugh beginning of, I think it was the last quarter, perhaps, yeah, it was the beginning of the last quarter. Ed Maguire said how well he'd played and how well he was kicking, and I was thinking, I can't really see that. It's not what I saw. So I think he did enough to stay in. He's not going to be moved out, but I think he had 3 kicks at halftime. We had 11 players at halftime who had less than 5 kicks.
Wow.
He was one of them. And so, he definitely turned it around. And the thing that Brayshaw, when he plays well, that kick that he did to Jones is what he's capable of. He does get distance a bit, like George makes a really good point about the distance that Oliver gets with his kicking and the depth. When Brayshaw's not shanking it, he can get really good penetration, and he kicks it pretty low and flat, and that was a beautiful kick that he spotted up Jones with. So if he can kick like that, he stays in on that second half. But yeah, it was, again, as I said, he only had 3 kicks, I think, at half time, and that's not enough for a mid-winger, half-back flanker, wherever you want to play him.
Well, I'll ask George about Brayshaw, but when you're talking about long, low, penetrating kicks, that kick from Petrarca to Fritsch was just beautiful. George, back to Gussie.
If we're talking about a few reruns of highlights, that kick of Petrarca's was just brilliant to watch. But I'd also encourage people to go back and have a look at that session of play where Petrarca was actually pinged for holding the ball. Just prior to that, Brayshaw had got the ball out. I don't know how he did it to get the ball out towards Petrarca, but that was the Gus that we remember from 2018, and it was a dramatic change of fortunes in the two half. As Big Man said, I think it was 2 or 3 possessions up to half time, and he hadn't spent much time on the ground. Although they had him in the middle for the first bounce of each quarter, he didn't seem to be in there very much beyond that. And then all of a sudden they put him in the middle and let him loose. Maybe that was the challenge that the coach set for him. If you don't pull your finger out this half, Gus, you won't need to bother about it next week. But he certainly did. To come out and play as well as he did in that second half was just amazing. I don't know. I think the coach has got a nice problem now about how many mids you can possibly fit into the middle. But if he attacks the game in the same way that he did in this game, it's a very nice problem, like I said, to have to try and decide.
We'll move on to defence. Stephen May, Big Man, you mentioned him briefly earlier. I think Stephen May has justified why we went hard after him. We needed a big monster body down back who was also mobile and can dispose of the ball well, although I will say that some of his kicking this year has been pretty average. This investment is really starting to pay off. You can argue about whether we should have gone for King, but at the time in 2018, coming off Weid and T-Mac's final series, the need was for a Stephen May type player down back, and last night was an excellent example of exactly what we needed and wanted. At this stage, I think he's a lock for top 5 in the BNF, and he's spoiled well. He took contested marks. He sticks up for his teammates. He's just a full package, and we really needed a guy like him. Bin Man, thoughts on Stephen May?
Yeah, I mean, one of my least favourite sports is looking back and complaining about draft, who we've recruited, because it's like complaining about yesterday's weather. There's nothing.
Welcome to Demon Land.
That's, did we overpay for him? All of that. But as you say, that's what we got him in for. And for me, what actually I liked was his aggression and his refusal to allow those. They came out with a clear plan, and to be honest, I'm a bit over the attacks on Gawn and the physical way that every team is going about playing him, and that was happening all over the ground. They obviously came out with a plan to be physical. That's why that was their strategy right from the get-go, and May just wasn't taking it. And I thought right to the end of the game, he stuck up for his younger players, in particular Lockhart. He wouldn't let anything, Tex Walker, get away with any of the rubbish that he was doing. It reminded me a bit of how Neitz used to play when he'd get fired up, and in the last 4 or 5 years of his career, when he was stomping around the forward line and generally not super aggressive as a player or as a bloke, but when you got him fired up and anyone had a shot at any one of his teammates, he was there flying the flag. So, and I think Melbourne need that. We need that. I mean, I guess every team does, but apart from his defensive work, which was terrific, that was the thing that I really enjoyed the most, and particularly after his comments. He was the only player interviewed for days, I think, till Max Gawn was on radio after the loss last week, and you could see in his face and his body language and his voice, he was really hurting after that. And that's what you see is your leaders come back the next week and play like they cared, and he played like that. And so he played for the jumper as well. You could see it. So I love that game, and it was a highlight for me for this year, actually.
George, Stephen May.
Yeah, that's what you exactly want in a leader, isn't it? When the job needs to be done, he leads by example, and he gave Tex Walker an absolute, utter, complete bath, and then the generaling of the back line, and also the defence of the players that Ben Manders talked about. He just wouldn't broach any rubbish from the Adelaide players, and Ben Man's right. They would try to intimidate players all over the ground. I like that little session on the wing when the ball was thrown in, and McHenry came in and tried to bully Stephen May, and May sort of said, run away, you little pipsqueak, and pushed him right away and let him go somewhere else. But also his defence of Lockhart, when I think it was Crocker was trying to give him a hard time, and then Tex was trying to give him a hard time. You just need those sort of enforcers like him around to stop that sort of rubbish going on. But he held his spot magnificently, and when he does things like that, it just enables the others in the back line to be able to do what their job is. They're not being intimidated, and the rest of them take that step up and shine because he's actually holding them all together and leading the way. It's a great performance from him.
One thing I'd really like for him to take on a little bit more is, you mentioned his turnovers. He certainly turns it over. It's funny when a player comes to your club, you sort of think they're going to be brilliant kicks all the time like Lewis was, and you go, oh, geez, he turns it over a bit more than I thought he might, and May falls into that category. But I'd love to see him pull the trigger a bit more, because when he does hit that low sort of dart that he can do over 60 metres, it's a weapon, and I feel like that's, tactically, that kick to the corridor or the cross is something that's more and more going to be important in footy this year, because teams are just, the zones are going diagonally down the ground and trapping teams on that boundary line, and you need to find a way out of it. And the way out of it is to take the high risk, potentially high reward kick into the centre, and not everyone's got that in their bag to hit that one, and he does when he goes for it. So I would hope that Goodwood encourages him to take that kick on, because otherwise we get caught just kicking down the line.
I've noticed with May, when he does those errors, it seems to be only in the first quarter, in about the first half of the first quarter. He seems to not. He needs to get into the game, and then he's more willing to take those longer kicks and make use of that, Arsenal. So I'll keep an eye on that for the coming weeks.
Was this Lever's first game in Adelaide against his old club? We've played them a few times up in the NT, but I think this was the first time he sort of had to face the crowd. I thought he did a good job with his intercept work. A few times I think he should actually go for the mark rather than punch it. And he cost us a goal at one stage, or was that, did he drop the mark? I can't remember, but...
went to punch it when he was all by himself in the square.
Yeah.
And there was one time he punched it. There was one time he punched it as well on the wing somewhere where he could have easily just taken the mark. So that's the only criticism I have with that. But other than that, I'm really happy with his intercept work. What did you think? What do you think of the decision? We took Omak out of the team, and we were when Omak came into the team, we were loving the fact that it gave Lever the opportunity to play that third man up, that intercept role. But then without Omak in there, how do you think that worked? It worked this week, but how do you think it's going to work going forward?
For mine, essentially Tomlinson played the same role as Omak would have, which was he swapped on Himmelberg a fair bit, and he might have taken who's the mini Tex that's up there, the other forward they have, but he was mainly on Himmelberg, so it allowed Lever to play that position anyway. Just on Lever, he earned a lot of points for me. He took a big hit backing back into a hole where he had Tex. And
he knew Tex was coming.
We knew Tex was coming. There was another player as well. And I thought Tex was really ropeable with the way he played footy, because he didn't even attempt to mark that. He was looking to smash Lever in that contest. And he had nowhere to go, Lever, and he stood up to it. He was lucky he didn't get hurt, because that was a pretty big contact. I thought he played fine, but at half-time, or just before half-time, I happened to look on the AFL. I was looking at the AFL stats. He was -1 at about 2 minutes to go into half-time in the AFL fantasy points. Had 1 kick, 2 kicks. But he was another player who played much better in the second half. And as I said, he took that hit. I think he played that position. For me, it was a mistake. I'm not quite sure the logic of dropping Omak. Obviously, I'm a pretty big Omak fan, but I'm hoping that Tomlinson came in to give Omak a chop out for this week. That seems logical to me, that Omak comes back in on Sunday, Tomlinson goes to the wing where we recruited to play him, and Jones goes out of the side. That's how I might see that happening, or at least perhaps that's how I hope it happens, because I don't think Tomlinson's a defender.
George, you wanted to talk about our defensive structures, particularly in stopping Adelaide switching?
Yeah, I think it's really hard to see what's going on because we're on telly still. There was a lot of times when Adelaide were coming out of their defence and all they wanted to do was switch it. Now their main go-to man in terms of getting the ball down the field is Lynch, and he just didn't get the ball at all. There was plenty of opportunities where normally they'd kick it across. I think we learnt from the game in Alice Springs 2 years ago where we completely destroyed them using the same technique. Just stop the ball getting into his hands, and Adelaide can't move the ball forward. And all we saw was the ball being kicked down the line, down the line, down the line. So the defensive structures, I think, were working brilliantly. And because it's on television, you can't see who's actually filling those holes on the other side. So I suspect it was, Tomlinson and Langdon doing an awful lot of work off screen, just making sure that there were no opportunities for Adelaide to kick it out the fat side. So again, the structures work very well against this team. So it'll be good to see it against a more serious team to make sure it's working properly.
We'll move on to some of our forwards. Jackson, another low possession game, but I think we've found a player here. 2 goals. He provides a proper ruck contest against the opposition second rucks. when Max has a rest, but he also at times was playing against their first ruck, and I thought he did all right when their ruck was is O'Brien. No, what's his name? O'Brien. Yeah,
O'Brien.
Yeah, he was sort of giving it was on top of Max early. It's a development year for Jackson, and given that there's no twos this year, I'm happy for him to cut his teeth in the seniors, whereas usually you might want him to spend a bit of time in the twos. Big man, are we happy with Jackson's game?
Yeah, just going back for a sec to the zone, to that defensive structure. That's quite interesting what George is saying. And I think it's been established right across the league at the moment. It's been quite a tactical shift in the game where the zones would run laterally down the ground for the last few years. But as I suggested before, they're now often diagonal, meaning that they're really all teams are looking to stop that switch. And you can see we get caught in it all the time, which is why we so often end up kicking to May down the line, to Maxi down the line. So all teams are looking to do it. There needs to be a way out of it. Melbourne have got that working super well, and they're really struggling to, we're stopping teams moving it forward most weeks. We didn't last week. On Jackson, I think he's definitely got something. You can see the X factor. I like the way he goes about it. He's got really good footy IQ, and the kick he kicked at the end of the game where he's still running on top of the ground, he roved it himself. Yep. He kicked it to Melksham. But what I loved about that kick, it's one of my biggest bugbears, is players who can't kick to the forward or the forward's advantage. He weighted it into space and allowed Melksham to run onto it. Yeah. It was a beautifully weighted kick because he was he was running full tilt. And that takes a bit of touch for a big fella. There was some questions when they were training, and we did have track watchers on Demon Land down there. Some queries about his kicking, but he looks a beautiful kick for a big fella. And he's definitely got something about him. It was good to see him get up. He got one of the softest free kicks. So that was a nice little bonus. He got the goal, but he's definitely got something. I'd love for him to grab a few more marks, obviously, but I don't know. You just get the feeling that he could grab 6 or 7 marks in a game, and away you go. He reminds me a little bit of both the King brothers in their height and reach and ability. Yeah, but he just seems like he's got that X factor. So I can certainly see what Taylor saw in him.
I think that marking will come. We've got to sort of be patient with that, but it will come. George, Jackson?
Yeah, he's going to be a keeper, this kid. It's easy to forget he's 18 years of age. That first mark that he took in the first quarter where he slid across the back of the pack and just plucked the ball from over the top of the lot of them was just brilliant. You can see that he's played basketball. His balance and his athleticism and his reading of the play is absolutely first class. And once again, to confirm what Ben Man said, you can see what Taylor saw in him. His ruck works the same. He doesn't finish up on the ground unless he gets pushed into it because he hasn't got the body build quite yet. But he knows exactly where he's going and where the ball's going and where he's going to land. And so because he keeps his feet, he gets those second opportunities that other ruckmen don't get. So, he's a real keeper. So, we look forward to a bit more of that. And while we can continue to give him the opportunities in the senior side, he's certainly keeping his spot for me. So perhaps, Andy, you can tell us what you think a little bit about his partner in crime up the front in Wiedemann.
Yeah, well, Weid, like Jackson, didn't get a heap of the ball, but since he's returned to the team, he's kicked 10 goals in 5 games, I think it is, 3 in this one. 2 goals a game is a great building block, to build a forward line around. If he was to kick 2 or 3 a game, but we're going to be very happy with that. Still, I'd like to see him clunk a few more marks and get a few more possessions. But I think the Weid and Jack, they work really well together. There was one instance at the end where Jackson provided a contest with his man, and it just allowed Wiedemann to take the easy mark. Is the 3 tall forward line off the table now? Where to now for T-Mac? He's going to find it very hard to get back in the team, particularly if these two are kicking goals. Bin Man?
Be a good name for a band, the 3-forward experiment. I think that particular band isn't going to get another gig because you didn't have to read between the lines in Goody's presser. That's off the cards, I think. And I don't know, we'll get a chance to talk about it tonight, but I've been a bit flummoxed by Goodwin's decisions this year, and that's one of them. He sort of criticised him without saying exactly, but he basically said big men have got to take marks. Well, T-Mac wasn't in the shape to be taking marks, so I can't see him back in a hurry, that's for sure, and certainly not a three-man forward line. I mean, why we started the season with two-man forward line, we jumped to a one-man forward line, that didn't work. We went to a two-man forward line, that did work, and then out of the blue for the perhaps our most important game of the season, we go to a three-man forward line. It was just baffling, and no. So the short answer is I can't see a three-man forward line coming back.
George, anything to add on that?
I'll throw out another question. I think the problem we've had is we've not looked at actually what our opposition have got in the way of particularly of defenders. When we tried two men against West Coast in the first game, we got absolutely pantsed, particularly when you're using one of your forwards as a backup ruck. It just leaves us short. So I think you've got to look at what the opposition have got. Sometimes that one man up forward with a swapping ruck works. Other times I think you might have to play the three-man, and other times the two-man. So you've got to vary it around depending on what the opposition are going to throw up. You just don't want to be shortchanged as we've done to ourselves in a couple of games this year. But I think Tommy Mack's problem is that he's got to show more than what he showed, certainly in that Port game. I suspect he's carrying some injury, and he doesn't seem to be able to jump in the same way that he was before, and he doesn't seem to have the same endurance that he had before. So I think one of our posters has alluded to that on Demonland over the last couple of weeks. So, but in the meantime, the Jackson-Wiedemann combination up front seems to be working well, and I suspect it'll stay that way this week because North Melbourne really only have Tarrant and who's their other man, McMillan as their main back. So that should give us enough coverage. We're not going to be shortchanged this week. So I think it'll just be the Wiedemann-Jackson show again.
And on Weid, I think the forwards. He kicks a couple of goals. He kicks accurately. At the end of the day, that's what you look at. 2 goals is not a bad return for your full forward. But his stats were pretty low. But I thought he competed super well. He still, for mine, isn't quite strong enough. There was one that was, I think, track kick to him. It was a beautiful kick. He had his player underneath the ball, and he didn't seem to be able to lock his legs into the ground and hold his player from pushing back on him. But maybe that'll come. But he is 24, I think. So. But I thought he competed really well in the air, and as George made a couple of really good points about Jackson. Jackson does read the ball beautifully, and I think, as you say, Andy, they're starting to work together quite well. And there was the second goal that Weid kicked was a really nice block by Jackson. Was funnily enough not a bad comment from Dermot Brereton who picked it up. No, it was he didn't go for it, didn't block, so he couldn't be given a free kick against him, but allowed Weid to go back with the flight of it with confidence. Took the mark, went back and kicked it. So 2 goals, that's good. Competes, that's good. And as George has about Jackson, that's the thing. He reads the ball super well. There was another bit of play that Jackson did that showed his that X factor. Was Salem missed him on the lead, and it was a terrible kick. It was only about 30 metres, 20 metres, and he missed him. But he was able to slide in, pick it up off the ground, and get the handball. And it was in the last quarter to set up a goal, and that's a pretty special skill set for a fella who's, I don't know, 6'5", 6'6", isn't he? In the old, so he's got some skills. But I think it's a really good point, Andy. They're starting to find a bit of synergy together, and it's nice to sort of a couple of young blokes up there, and maybe one day they can get a real hold of a game and kick a bag between them.
Love to see that. Go, George.
Yeah, I think what we need to do with both of them is send them to Mrs. Petraka over the summer period
Bulk 'em up.
and have a good session with her pasta dishes, so they can both put on a couple of pounds at least of weight, but hopefully a bit more muscle. But the only thing I'd like to add about Wiedemann is I wish he'd play a little bit more in front. I think there were 3 opportunities even in the first quarter or second quarter as well where the ball dropped short. It would have been an easy chest mark, and Talia was able to get in front. So, yeah, he needs just to play that a little bit more strategically in those positions. So, but his marking other than that was quite adequate there.
We'll go on to Maxi. During the week, we heard the news that every Melbourne supporter dreads hearing, that Max has gone for scans and may miss. We were then informed that it's a possible strain in his lats, and then we were told that he'd been cleared to play. Now, I'll put this one out to you guys. Given that we were playing the bottom team, there's lots of givens here, given there was pressure on Goody, on the team after last week's insipid effort, given that Max is the captain and he'd want to lead by example, given that in the next 10 days after the Crows game, we've got Goldstein and Grundy coming up, and the Kangaroos game is off less than a 4-day break. So given all that, what do you think? Should we have played Max? Big Ben, I'll start with you. We obviously don't know what the result would have been, but should we have played him, given what's coming up as well?
No, I don't think so. I mean, it just didn't make sense. And I know we're going to talk about Bartlett's comments later on. I wonder, in the absence of those comments, would have we played him? And my feeling is no, because, it depends where you think your footy club's at. I mean, we've got a full list, 2 or 3 players off a full list, none of which are in the best 22. We're playing a team rock bottom with a percentage a tick over 50. We've got a game in 4 days' time against probably, arguably at the moment, the second best ruckman in the league, you could argue. You rest him, don't you? I mean, I just couldn't see the logic in it. He had scans. Everyone knew he was injured. It sounded like a relatively serious injury. And you exposed him to getting smashed, when is exactly what happened. They went out and smashed him.
Yeah, and we're going around as well saying how much pain he's in with that as well, but he can play. It's just telling teams, well, just, hit him where it hurts, basically.
Exactly. I just don't see he was targeted so much that Goodwin came out afterwards, who hasn't said anything about it all season.
Yep.
And flagged, look, it's not on. They flagged also that they'd gone to the umpires or the AFL and said this is an issue. So umpires didn't do anything about this issue. They seem to do about something, any other issue that's flagged, they seem to do something about.
But what do you
I just don't see the logic of why you'd play him and take that risk.
George, I'll ask you in a second, but I'll stay with Big Man. Those comments about that Goodwin made in reference to that he's gone to the umpires to sort of highlight the treatment that Max is getting, in particular getting to the the next ruck contest or getting to the next contest. What do you think of the coach coming out and saying that? It highlights it. So is it going to be looked at? Do you think? Is it the right thing to say for a coach to say that?
Yeah, I've got no problems with him saying it, because what he said was that they've been to the AFL or the umpires already. It wasn't as if they were saying they were going to.
Yeah.
He was frustrated that they'd already done it. They just hadn't talked about it. I absolutely got no problem with it. I mean, I think I said last week, I mentioned all the week before, it's not on. And I mean, as Goodwin said, it's not on targeting any players, but your best players in the game. Everyone should be protected, but when there's a clear strategy to go out and hurt a fella, Tex Walker clipped him, and there's been nothing in the MRO. They showed it on the replay. He ended up getting a free in that contest, or an Adelaide player did, but the replay clearly showed that Tex Walker did the old missed the footy hit, gone in the back of the head routine. It just makes me furious. I've got no problem with Goodwin's comments.
George, should we have played Maxi this week?
Yeah, big question, isn't it? Firstly, Tex did get charged with striking Max and got a $1,000 fine. But I think that Max may well have decided that he was going to play regardless. He knew exactly what was on the line with this game. And if he felt that he could get the team over the line, then he was going to go out there. Now, at the end of the day, it's been done, so we look at it. But more importantly for me is what are we going to do this week? He's off a 4-day break. He's been pummeled around even more. We've got Goldstein up against him, but North Melbourne are missing Zeeble and Cunnington from their midfield. So Goldstein might be able to get his hands on the ball, but he hasn't got anyone to hit it to, which has been partly most of North Melbourne's problem this year. So we've got Bruce, who's been sitting there. Here's the opportunity, and what other opportunity will there be in this season to play a team that's on the bottom of the ladder or close to the bottom of the ladder? And I think this might be the one. Rest Max for this week, so that he's not as vulnerable when he comes up against Grundy in the following game. Dawes, they're probably their backup ruck, but there's a question over him. He got an ankle injury this week, and I think Jackson will cover him nicely. That'll be a good competition to watch between those two with their athleticism. But if Max is still injured, I'd just give him the break now off another 4-day break. We don't need to be pushing him this hard, or he will break down in those games that I suspect it's going to be very critical towards the end of the season about getting us over the line.
The umpiring, some of the worst one-sided I've ever seen. Not getting paid frees that are there when your opposition is getting paid them, particularly at their home venue, is one thing, and you can sort of understand that. You know, they get the crowd sort of takes them, but last night it seemed that the Crows were getting frees plucked out of thin air that just weren't even there. And I don't know, maybe it's my one eye, viewing these games with one eye, but am I so one-eyed that I don't even have words for it? I can't even find the words for it. George, am I right? Were there just some ridiculous free kicks?
We're all one-eyed, but gee, there was some pretty ordinary. It's not so much the decisions; it's the non-decisions as well. And there were plenty of times in this game, and also in other games in the round. The umpires have obviously changed the rules around holding the ball from what it was, 3-4 weeks ago. But they've reverted to the worst situation of not paying anything when it is plainly obvious that the ball has not been kicked or handballed by the player after having prior opportunity. And you need to just enforce the rules as they are. And like I said, they've reverted to type. Unfortunately, last night we had one umpire who's in his first season and it showed. We had Donlan there as well, who hasn't participated in a grand final for 9 years, and I think that tells you something. And I can't remember who the third umpire was, but look, it's not just in our game, and it's across all games. There's some pretty ordinary decision-making processes going on at the moment, and they just need. We're all crying out for it, and we'll be doing the same next year as we've done in the past. We just want consistency, and we're certainly not getting it at the moment. So, yeah, we'll be frustrated again this week.
Big man, how frustrated were you?
Funnily enough, I took a perverse pleasure in it because I was thinking, this is good because we're up against an Adelaide crowd, such as it was, probably only 4,000 or 5,000 of them. And we were up against the umpires as well. And it felt like a proper Melbourne football match. We were getting hammered by the umpires. We're playing the bottom of the side bottom of the ladder in a must-win game. It felt like I was back in 1979 at Moorabbin. So it was some of the most. It was some of the most appalling umpiring I can recall. I think I just sort of gave up on expecting them to not umpire poorly, but there were 3 non-dropping of the ball decisions at one point, where at the beginning, even 2 weeks ago, each one of them would have been paid immediately, where Adelaide player grabbed the ball, elected to take them on, dropped the ball, and on it went. And it was inexplicable when I could only laugh at the irony of some of the booing that went on when we got a free kick.
That's where I took pleasure in. Their booing.
I was just thinking, if I was at the ground and I heard anyone boo, how berserk I would have gone at the ground.
That's what I miss about not going to the footy is the yelling at the umpires or at opposition supporters. That's what I really miss.
So yeah, I try to be honest. I consciously decided at one point not to get annoyed by it because it was annoying enough watching us turn the ball over time after time in that first half without also adding angst at the umpire into the mix.
While we're talking about the crowd, does anybody have any idea who Mr. Woohoo is in the crowd?
No, so that was brought up again on Demon Land. The Woohoo mystery guy. If you listen to, if you're watching the game, you might have heard after we kicked the goal. Kicked a few goals, the Woohoo guy, and I've actually got audio of that. If you did miss that, I took some clips. I've got to find it here. I think it's on. Yeah, here it is. Just have a listen to this. This is after about 4 or 5 goals. See if you can hear the Woohoo man. Oh, hold on a sec. I've got to pull up the audio on that channel.
To the breakout for the biggest margin of it because Harley Bennell.
Minutes on the clock.
Beauty and finding
From Duday.
You might have heard the woohoo a few times. And sorry if I blew anyone's ears out.
You did that, Andy. That's great. That sort of technical ability well beyond my my skill set.
So
you must have one hell of a voice to be able to be noticed like that.
Well, I remember when I heard him during this game, and then I remembered back to a game we played, and I think it was against Adelaide, but it could have been Port Adelaide. I don't know. So it's obviously he's a Melbourne supporter, and he's must sit in an area that's right next to maybe one of the mics that gets picked up. Maybe I don't know if the camera guys, they wouldn't have mics on those cameras, but there must be mics in the crowd somewhere, and he must be sitting very close to that because I've heard him a few times
I think
throughout the years.
I've got a feeling I heard him at. Maybe I'm just completely imagining it, but at one of the games we played against Adelaide at Alice Springs.
He might have travelled.
Yeah, but maybe it's like one of those things you buy a red car and that's all you see is red cars.
So I don't know. We don't know who that is. Someone on the thread that we were talking about, it said that someone might have claimed it was them in a previous year in one of the match day threads that we have going each week. I don't recall that, but someone had gone through a couple of the post-match things in 2017 and didn't find it and didn't really want to go back to 2016 because obviously some things haven't changed on Demon Land, particularly in the match day threads when there's a bit of frustration going on. So if anyone wants to find that...
Maybe if we're all allowed back to the football one day, we can start a trend for Melbourne supporters whenever we get a goal.
Yeah, a collective woohoo.
Yeah, that can be.
Yeah, like the old ooze.
Maybe the Demon Land posters can do it as a way of identifying each other in the crowd.
Well, it won't happen then.
Let's move on. Nibbler's tackle. I thought he showed some real aggression with his tackling all night, which ironically will probably have him sidelined for a couple of weeks. He's been cited and has been referred straight to the tribunal. I'm told that, or from what I've read, that's if found guilty. That's an automatic 3 weeks. I think he will be found guilty based on the vision. I don't think he'll get off of that. Obviously, they want to stamp that out of the game. So was the tackle silly? I'll start with you, George.
A bit hard to judge. What else does he do?
Yeah.
Look, he went too far with it, but when do you stop?
Yeah.
As a player, and you've been charged with a coach to tackle and tackle seriously. The ball's and the player's effectively behind you as he effectively had his jumper and was swinging him that way. And you're not meant to do that, I'm afraid. And if there's consequences, that's what happens. But I think if the Adelaide player hadn't tried to kick the ball, he actually would have kept both feet on the ground. It wouldn't have been a problem. But that's an argument for the QCs that will be employed in the tribunal. But that's just what it is. You can't do it these days.
Well, it depends. Some players can, because Burgoyne has twice this year done it and got off. And after the first time was when they decided to crack down on it this year, and he still got off a few weeks later. Bin Man, thoughts on that tackle?
Look, to be honest, I think he was a bit unlucky because it was really the fact that it was a combination of he had his hand, didn't he? And they all seem to do that now. Jones did a couple of karate things where he did the same thing, where they grabbed one hand as a locking mechanism so they can't get rid of it with the other, I presume. So he did that, but it was the jumper. The jumper pulled away from him, so it was a bit unlucky, and he slinged him, and he was a pretty light-looking. I think he's only a young player.
Yeah, he's small.
My feeling is, to be honest, is that he was unlucky that it happened, but I think it's fair enough for him to go, to be honest. I hated to see he was completely knocked out, that kid.
Yeah, didn't know where he was.
To see it for exactly that reason. It was just that slinging motion at the end where he whipped him, like that whipping motion. As I say, a bit unlucky, Nibbler, but I think, I wouldn't be too shocked, or I wouldn't be too disappointed if he gets suspended, because it's such a dangerous thing. And he was completely knocked senseless. That was another thing that for that game, that was relatively early in the game, and they were one down on the bench because of that pretty early. So it's another thing to keep in mind in terms of judging how well we played in that last quarter. But it looked awful, and I think he'll probably be found guilty. Yeah.
George, you mentioned the forward, the tackle. That you've got to do it. And I think you mentioned that they've obviously got the instruction to go out there and tackle more, and we've been critical of our forward line of not laying those tackles. George, I think the players have been listening. Players or the coaches have been listening to you, because you'll be happy to know that the following tackle stats from our forward, regular listeners might be aware that George has been critical of some of our forward tackling efforts or lack thereof. Fritsch had 4, Neil Bullen had 4, Melksham had 3. All 3 were just behind Track, Oliver and Jones with 8, 6 and 5 respectively. So that's between Fritsch, Neil Bullen and Melksham. What's that? That's 11 tackles from them, whereas we've had almost 1 or 0 between sort of our forwards, with the exception of Cozzy Pickett, who wasn't playing this week. So I think that the instruction for the forwards has been to go out and tackle more forward pressure, and that certainly happened this week.
Yeah, and look at the results that we got as a result of it. They speak for themselves. You've got to do that work in the forward line and get the ball in. The idea is to get it in there as many times as possible, and when you get it in there, to retain it in there. As we've seen in these past couple of weeks, the ball just rebounded out all too easily, and that did not happen at all in this game that I can remember. So, but they need to make sure that that's what they're doing every single week. That's the standard that we have to aspire to every single week.
What did you boys think of Vandenberg's that push after we'd got the free kick, and then we get the reversal? For me, it's absolutely inexcusable, totally unnecessary. Could have proved costly, had they run away with the game in the end. Obviously, that didn't happen, but that can prove costly. The commentators were going on and on how in 2 other games a reversal like that had cost the teams. Lucky for him, it didn't in the end, but I thought it was very silly from someone who's one of the more senior members of the team. Man?
I think you're being a bit tough, to be honest. Watching the game, I didn't see what had happened, and I'm not sure whether I'd looked away or I was looking at the stats or something, and so I was a bit confused at what happened. I think actually what was my KO was playing up or it was lagging, so I was watching that for that quarter on sort of stutter mode, and so I wasn't sure what had happened. And just the way the commentators were talking, I was thinking that something really serious had happened. And when they showed it, I thought, "You're joking me? That would happen 25, 30 times a game." And, they're banging on about it. I mean,
Yeah,
sure,
no, I'm not so much talking about that. I thought they went overboard in how...
but it wasn't a free kick. I mean, that's not a free kick.
You can see how that's reversed. He dunked his head into the...
Not a chance. He barely... I mean, he was on the ground.
Yeah.
That's not what free kick is that? What's it for? He didn't push him in the back. He didn't hurt him. What's the free kick for?
I can see how they would reverse that on the siren. The fact is, would that have happened? I don't know if that would have happened if it wasn't at the siren. I don't know. I don't know.
Well, someone asked
Maybe
on the game day thread, and I'm not sure what the answer is. Can you pay a free kick after the siren is blown?
Well, they didn't give him the kick. They didn't give the guy the ball to take the kick. Not that he can do anything.
It. So, yeah, well, they didn't give. So, can you reverse a free kick? Like, the reversing implies that the other person gets the free kick.
But what happens in that situation? Like, what, then you can just punch on or something?
Yeah, we get reported. Or
yeah. Interesting, George.
I think this is part of the frustration that we had with the umpires is the inconsistencies. Whether or not, as Eddie was alluding to, that there's been a message that's come from on high about this off-the-ball niggling that's going on, but then they didn't equally apply it to what was going on with Gawn and others on the field. So it was really annoying. The question is about the discipline, that once again it's cost us or potentially cost us, given that we've lost, 3 games this year by less than a kick. You just can't afford to do those silly things at that point in the game. When you know that we've just got the free kick in front of goal, it doesn't matter what's been happening before. You just pull your head in and let us kick the goal. Then you can have a crack at them on the way back to the bench if you want to. But it was just again a silly piece of lack of discipline, and there was a lot going on behind the ball. A lot of niggle in the game, a lot of really nasty stuff. Just for example, what's come up in the MRO today, we've had Thomas Barrow was charged with rough conduct against Luke Brown. Taylor Walker was charged with striking Max Gawn. Harley Bennell was charged in engaging in rough conduct. And Lachlan Murphy with engaging in rough conduct, and Jay Lockhart with striking. There's a lot going on. I didn't see any of those during the game. I don't know about the others, but there's obviously a lot of bad niggle going on behind the scenes, and maybe that was, although it was early on, the umpire's way of trying to put some control into it. But again, the lack of consistency is just annoying.
The 2 things there, I mean, it just drives me spare that they come out during the week and Hocking, apparently, which I'd not heard, makes a pronouncement that they're going to stamp it out, and then what happens, the umpires are all over it. But as you say, George, they didn't apply that through the game. And then there was an incident where May was already over the boundary line and that little twerp was trying to get into him afterwards and clearly pushed him. If it had been another smaller player like Lockhart, he would have gone over. It was much worse than what Van den Berg did. That was the most ridiculous free kick all day, or not even a free kick. I think that sure, you don't give them an excuse, but that happens 25, 30 times a game after someone takes a mark and gives away for a kick. It happened to us 4 or 5 times, and they didn't reverse it or give us a free. So, yeah, I thought that was ridiculous. The other thing you mentioned, George, I'm amazed that Bennell got fined for rough conduct, because it must have been his only rough conduct all day. He was, say he was physical would be overstating it.
Yeah, he went missing for most of the game as well in terms of getting the ball. At one stage, I didn't even know he was playing. And I was actually a bit baffled. What did you think? We'll move on in a second, but Fritsch takes that mark and he just handballs. Obviously, Bennell had called for it, but he was quite stationary and on still a tight angle. What did you think of that one? I think I missed it actually happening at the time when he kicked that goal, but then I obviously saw the replay. But I don't know. What did you think of that decision to sort of just handball it off to a stationary player to kick it? To kick a snap.
And the outcome was good. Was the right thing to do.
Great outcome, yes.
Yeah.
But had he missed it, it would have been, what did you just do?
Would be critical of it. Bennell can certainly nail those ones quite easily, and whether Fritsch thought he was on the angle was going to have difficulty getting it, I don't know. But it's good that it went through. Because without it going through, it would have been a very embarrassing failure again in the forward line. Harley just didn't seem to be, to me, he seemed like he had something else on his mind the whole game. He just wasn't switched on. It was an opportunity in this game, because there's not a lot. There wasn't a lot of skill on the other side, so he would have had the opportunity to get into space that he normally does, but he just seemed to be, that just behind the game all the time as it was going on, which is unusual for him, I think. I don't know. How do you feel about that?
I thought he had quite a poor game. I don't know. I don't know if his mind was on something else, but I thought he had a poor game.
We talked a couple of weeks ago about whether he's physical. We agreed that that's not what he's in the side for, but I think there's certainly a threshold, and for mine he was under it. It's a bit of a worry because it's a cultural thing, isn't it? Like he definitely took some short steps. His tackling was non-existent. So it'll be really interesting to see if he gets picked this week. I'm really on the fence whether I would, because I was more than a bit disappointed in his physical effort, and as George says, it was quite a physical game for pretty much up to three-quarter time, when then it showed how inexperienced that a lot of young players, and I think they completely ran out of gas. I think Nick said as much afterwards, and in that context, he didn't really fly the flag much, didn't tackle hard, and a bit of a concern. On that goal, I thought that was brilliant, though. That was his best thing he did all day.
Look, it was nice. I'm saying
Fritsch would have had to kick. Yeah, well, Fritsch would have had to kick that from the pocket on his left, and that would have gone the opposite side, and he shapes the ball the wrong way, Fritsch, for that kick. So it was poor by Adelaide to allow that to happen, I thought.
Just on Bennell, he's had five possessions, 2 tackles, he's kicked the goal. But I also thought in the Hawthorn game, he also, and we talked about this, that he took a few short steps, but I had no problem with that as long as he sort of produces and does other things. But he didn't do any of those things with the exception of that goal this week. So that's when I start having a problem. And if we start seeing more and more of that I don't like. So
Exactly.
I don't think he's ever going to be that player that doesn't, that goes in hard. But I'm prepared to sort of look the other way if he's doing all the other things and doing Harley Bennell things. But if he's not, then there's no place for him. Well, I think for me that's it for the game. We'll talk Bartlett. His comments after last week's game. This is what he said. He said it was disgraceful. When you pull on a Melbourne jumper, we don't give them out in Wheaties packets. You have to show respect for the jumper and the fans, and apart from a few blokes last night, it was an insipid performance. It wasn't Melbourne-like, and it won't be tolerated going forward. The coach and the footy guys need to address it. I'm sure they had a tough review, but we just can't serve up that kind of rubbish for our fans and supporters and footy in general. Boys, your thoughts on that? Pretty harsh words going into what are your thoughts just in general, and also going into a game against the bottom team? B-Man, you want to start with it?
Yeah, I was really still not 100% sure sort of what my feeling is about it. I sort of think I've landed on the side of, I don't think they were very wise comments, but the issue I have is what was the thinking he had behind doing it. It strikes me as that it would be unlikely there wasn't some strategic, he didn't have a strategy behind it, because it wasn't, he would have had to reach out to the Herald Sun to set up that interview with Ralph for it to be behind the paywall. So it wasn't as if he'd gone on SEN or RSN and it was an open thing, or did a press conference, or it had an element. It wasn't directly afterwards, was it? It was the next day, I think.
Yeah.
Or it must have been. So it seems to me that it was strategic, and so without understanding what what was motivating and what he was trying to achieve, it's hard to know, to be honest. But I just think, he's been silent pretty much for 4 years, and I like being silent. I don't want an Eddie Maguire. I think that it's, the coach doesn't need that sort of distraction. And the other thing that was strange was Essendon got flogged by 70, 80 points by Brisbane or whatever it was, kicked 3-4 goals for a game of footy. They haven't made finals for 15 years. The heat would have been on them. I think there's this culture in footy that I hate, which is let's get the coach. It becomes a sport every year about which, they run a betting market on which coach will get sacked first. And, Bartlett created that dialogue or that media thing, and it's hard to think that a clever fellow like him didn't do that deliberately. And of course, all the footy shows were talking about Goodwin's future all of a sudden, and where they weren't. We win this game, and they by 50, 60 points, and it would never have got brought up. I mean, of course, we would have been under pressure because we played so terribly. But I thought it was quite strange. But I'd love to know what the logic was.
But I also wonder, they sort of, by making comments like that, you're backing yourself in a corner, because had we lost to Adelaide and then lost to North, they've backed themselves into a corner that they almost have to get, sack the coach based on the comments. He didn't come out and say that the guy's job's on the line, but if the performances keep up, you can't sack all the players. So it sort of backs them into a bit of a corner. George, your thoughts?
Yeah, I take almost a contrary view, in the sense that if we'd lost to Adelaide and we were to lose to North, the coach's position should be under question. So I think Binman's right. It was strategic, and it wasn't designed for the players, the commentary. It was designed for the sponsors and the supporters and the members, because after that performance against Port Adelaide, you really expect something to be done as a supporter or a member. And what else can you do? The coach will obviously have the words with the players and get the message across to them. But it also assuages the fury that the supporters and the members have over a performance like that. It doesn't change anything, but it does get the message across that people expect a leader to do something in a situation like that, and that's all he can do. So from that perspective, I don't have any problems with it. The sponsors and in this year, the sponsors and the membership is a very, very important thing. Keeping those people on side is super important if there's to be a future for the club. So if it's done that, then it's worked. But I suspect that's the strategic approach that Bartlett had taken. So, and in a lot of industries, I don't know what industries you guys work in necessarily, but if you put in a bad performance, you expect to hear it from the boss, don't you? So this was exactly the same for the football fraternity.
Yeah, except you'd hear from your CEO in most organisations, not your chairman or your board, but I would have thought. But yeah, I take your point, George, in terms of the sponsors in particular. And I mean, if it was, you have to assume it was strategic. So, and I agree that the audience, therefore, was not the players. So I suspect if it was, that he would have given heads up to the football department, to Goody and the players, that this was coming. Get yourself ready. There was no media booked afterwards, so that was no coincidence. The other thing about the timing, and maybe if that's the case, maybe, in fact, that's exactly what he wanted to do. He wanted Melbourne to be talked about on the footy shows, and he wanted to dominate the media because, it's a maxim, isn't it, that bad news is as good as good news in terms of coverage. It did get us in front. It also probably brought a lot more attention to this game than otherwise would have. So suddenly Fox were building it up as a must-win game for us. So there was perhaps a bit more attention on it than otherwise would have been the case. The sponsors would like that. So perhaps that was what the logic was. But they were certainly pretty fierce comments, weren't they?
Yeah, certainly. George, did you want to add something before we move on?
No, that's fine.
All right, well,
we have moved on.
We've won one, but we've got to back it up again next week, or next week, this week in a few days. As I said, I don't know what day it is at the moment. Not used to playing midweek and then playing again on the weekend. So we got another game this weekend against North. George, any changes you see happening? It looks like Neil Bullen will be out. Cozzy, he was out of the team with an ankle injury, but they said that he'd be available for the next game. Is this an ankle injury, or are they managing him? And will we see him get back in the team this week?
Yeah, probably a bit of both with Cozzy, perhaps. I suspect we'll see him back in the side, even if Neil Bullen were to be the only change, because we will have to make one, and it'll have to be a small running player, and Cozzy's the natural choice unless they brought Espargo in. I noticed Espargo was in the rooms afterwards warming up, so that was interesting, but we've got the players available is the main thing. The question is, does Bennell stay in the side? There was one post that I saw on Demonland that said Vandenberg might have done an eye socket as well. So I haven't heard anything to confirm that, but I hope that's not the case. But again, those are the only logical changes that I can see. This was a winning side, so why would you change it? We come up against North this week.
On a 4-day break.
Sorry?
We've got the 4-day break, so there is that whole point of do you manage? A lot of teams are managing players. It's 4-day break, and then we've got 6 days until the next game. But yeah, there's that possibility that we might have to rest some players. So I don't know. And then there's Max as well. What do we do?
Yeah,
there?
Max is the big question with that 4-day break, isn't he? So North have got more than enough problems at the moment, and maybe this is the opportunity to rest a few of those players. They've got obviously no Brown this week, still no Cunnington and Zeeble in the mids. Dorr did an ankle during the game against Geelong, and Pittard also did an ankle against Geelong. And that was a Geelong side that they lost to by 47 points. And Geelong didn't have Ablett and Radicalier playing and Rowan playing. So you'd think they're on their knees quite literally. So it'll be interesting to see what the changes are this week, apart from A and B.
Big man, your changes?
Yeah, it's let's say Neil Bullen doesn't get suspended, which would be a bit of a surprise. I think he comes out. I've never been a particularly huge criticiser of Neil Bullen. He gives that run and all of that, but he was pretty average. I thought he makes you wonder 40-odd players fit, and he's in it. Makes me a bit concerned. We've got an abundance of mediocrity in that if he can be in our best 22, such was his game. But so I think he'll go at it. I would have Melksham out. I was, again, I just lost patience with him. He can kick the ball, but he just plays selfish. There was a free kick. He got a free kick, and Track took the advantage, and the instinctive expression on Melksham's face was being annoyed, and maybe that's unfair. Maybe I'm misreading that expression. But he just, I don't know. There was a play where he didn't bend down to pick it up. He tried to kick it along the ground. He completely squibbed a mark in that last quarter where he didn't back, and it was a nice kick in from, I think, Jackson, actually. I'd be dropping him. He's a beautiful kick, and it seems ridiculous to drop someone who's such a good kick. But
And he's kicked 2 goals.
I'd bring Matt Hannon in for him. Cozzy comes in for A and B. Personally, I'd bring Omac back in, put Tomlinson up the ground, and I just think Jones comes out because I think we're too slow with Tomlinson, Brayshaw and Jones in the same side. They're 3 really slow AFL footballers. I just don't think he can carry 3 players that slow. And Jones played pretty well. He would be pretty unlucky to go out. As I say, 3 players that slow, it makes your team struggle across the ground.
Interesting. Anything else?
Your changes, Andy?
Nibbler comes out, Cozzy in. I think they're going to play Max. I don't think we're going to take him out, even though he probably should have been rested this week. I don't know if it depends on Vandenberg. He did cop that head knock. I would say if there is any eye socket or facial things, it was from that knock where he had the headband on for the rest of the game. His head bandaged, I should say.
It was brilliant, wasn't it? Because that gave Viney the goal.
Yes.
When he crashed heads, he actually cleaned the opposition defender out of the way.
But Vandenberg's form hasn't. He played last week as well, didn't he? That's when he came back.
That's correct.
He didn't do much last week nor this week, so he's only had 6 possessions this week. I've been a bit disappointed because we were quite happy with his ferocity and attack on the ball and the man in those couple of weeks where we had the wins.
Looks like a butcher, kicks like a butcher.
So yeah, I think there for me that's our only changes. Yeah.
Do we keep Benell?
I don't know. Look, we've got. I think it'd be nice for him to get a run of a few games in a row. We managed him the other week. I'd like to see them keep playing. I wasn't wrapped with his game, so he might not have deserved to keep his spot, but I'd like to have.
What do you boys think about how Jones has been playing?
Jones it's a funny one for me because you got to sort of take a bit of the emotion out of it, but I think we've seen the end of Jones. And maybe I'd like to see a guy like Rivers get back in the team. And Jones has sort of been playing sort of the half-back wing, but I wouldn't mind to see Rivers be given another go. Given we don't have... What's happening? Do we know... Is there anything happening with our 2s at the moment? While we're in Adelaide, I doubt there's anything happening there. So none of those guys are getting games into them. And that's a worry too. For when it's time for any of them to get a game. So the only way for them to get a game is for us to play them in the seniors.
Yeah, and I don't know how much value they get out of these scratch matches.
Are we playing scratch matches at the moment while we're in Adelaide?
I don't know. I can't imagine. They're taking 40 players to Adelaide.
No.
So that they might have taken half a dozen. I saw Pickett and Spargo. I can't remember who else. It was someone else. Hannon as well were all in Adelaide. So they might have taken potentially half a dozen over there. But
you'd think they would have taken T-Mac and O-Mac over as well for just in case something happened to our forwards or backs. I don't even know whether Bruce would have come over.
They would have taken their 4 emergencies. Well, they had 4 emergencies listed.
Who was that?
Mac and Omac were amongst them, so you would have thought they would have come across. Spargo was on that list as well. But do either of you know when the teams come out? Because it's the next round.
Yeah, we're playing Sunday. Our team for this week, we play Wednesday, was announced on Tuesday. I guess there's a different. Usually, the teams would be announced on Thursday night, isn't it? Usually, but
I was hoping it'd be tonight.
you think it'd be a bit different with this, compressed fixture, and off a 4-day break. It might be Friday or even Saturday. I don't know.
Yeah.
Isn't it a good situation that we do find ourselves in, though, with when you look at other sides and you compare what our situation was in 2019, that really who are our injured players that are really problematic to us at the moment. The ones we've got those 3 or 4 who are on long-term ones, and Vandenberg's got his head problems, whatever they might be, but. Really, we've got a full list to select from at the moment. That's absolutely extraordinary compared to last season, but also extraordinary when you look at the lists on other clubs. With whatever's going on this year, we've been blessed so far. So, can we take full advantage of that?
And on that, George, I find it curious the discussion then about, and Goody came out, I think it was yesterday, and again said, no, we play our best, and accept if people were bruised, but why not take advantage of that fact? And if you've got a whole bunch of fresh players, run your 3 or 4 players that can, give maybe someone like a Hibbert a break, or why not take advantage of almost a full list? You can always, there's some players that can play 2-3 games and then go out for the season, but otherwise you've got a bunch of boys running around at the hub not playing, and if they need to step up they won't be ready, and you're not taking advantage of how many fit players you've got in this period.
Yeah, that was my whole point with playing a guy like Rivers, because you need to get games into some of these guys. So maybe Spargo will get a game. I don't know. The other thing that was announced today, was it today? Yes, our round 13 fixture after the Collingwood game is the Bulldogs off a full 7-day break. Imagine that, a full 7 days. It's ludicrous in this world of football at the moment. So we're playing them at Metricon on the Gold Coast. Happy with that?
Luxury. Absolute luxury.
Sheer luxury. And what's their break? Andy?
I will have a look now. I'm on the AFL site, which is one of the worst websites going around at the moment. Let's have a look. They play, and of course the internet's slow when you're looking something up. It's around 12. Will be not round 11. They are playing the Lions on the same day as us. Actually, so that's North Melbourne, where the Bulldogs are playing the next day. After we play Collingwood on the Saturday night, they're playing at 1 o'clock. They're playing Adelaide at Metricon Stadium on the Sunday.
So 6-day break.
So they've got a 6-day break.
Well, that's good. Yeah, that's good.
I'm not sure where are the Bulldogs located. They're probably closer. They're probably camped outside Metricon. Happy with that. So who have we got coming after that? We've got to make up the Essendon game. That's got to be played. That'll probably be played. You'd imagine. When are they playing? They're playing round. They're playing round 13 in the Northern Territory. They're playing the Dreamtime game. So I'm wondering if round 14 might be our game against Essendon. Do you think they would play that in the Northern Territory? Because we've got to play in the Northern Territory. I guess a team like Fremantle is probably the team that might get earmarked for us to play there. But I'm wondering if we play Essendon there, given that they will be there the week before.
That's a possibility. I think we'll be playing one game in Alice Springs. The other games that they're playing, the Suns are playing up there in Darwin, and so I suspect there'll be a game in Alice Springs to fulfil the contractual obligations that they've got, that the league has, I think, as well as us. So that could well be a possibility. I thought it was either I thought it was more likely to be Freo, but now that you mention it, Eston might be a strong possibility as well.
Well,
And just on Andy, who we've got left, we've played now 5 of the top 6, I think, haven't we? So we've got the Saints in the top 8 still to come, but we've got Freo, the Dogs,
Sydney, Essendon.
So the game's on our racket in tennis speak, isn't it? Because, we've played Port now, we've played Lions, we've Geelong and Richmond. They're the 4 best, and West Coast. So, they're the 5 best teams in the competition by a mile, those 5, and we've played them all. We're playing teams around us. In 2018, when we're flying, we struggled against those top teams, but we were smashing the teams below us. If we're serious about what Bartlett said when he came on, when you boys talked to him a few weeks back about making the finals is a pass mark. We should be making the finals from here. No excuses with the injury list that George notes and who we've got left to play.
Yeah.
And that makes this round even more important to us. If we were to lose to North Melbourne, effectively we'll be 2 games out of the 8, with the other games that'll happen during the week and subsequently. So we have to win this game, and we'll still be a game out of the 8 with a game in hand. But at least we're up there and competitive. But lose this week and. You're really putting yourself right behind the 8 ball and a long way back, and then you start to depend on other teams losing games in order to sneak in. So very important this week as well, even though every week's important, but you can't afford to throw the game with so few remaining in the season.
And honestly, it's a bit like this game that we just played. If we don't win this, we're not good enough to make the finals. It's as simple as that. We should be beating this team with the injuries they have and the way they're travelling. If we can't, then it says that we're not a finals football team.
Exactly. All right, boys. I think we're going to leave it there. Well, let's hope we get a win on the weekend, and we'll be if we do get a win, that's 5-5, and looking good going into the Collingwood game the week after that. So looking forward to that. We'll be back next week. Thank you, Binman, and thank you, George. Let's see you next week. Go D's.
Go Red Land.
4 day break.
Come on, Demons. Come on, Demons.